Hey guys, Disney Nuts here. Really happy for today's episode of how I shot this because it's something you guys have been asking me for a while, and it's how I shot this. Okay, pretty cool, right? If you recognize the scene, it's obviously the lobby of the Tower of Terror, the Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World in Florida. And I'm going to show you what I did and how I shot it, how we went in through the queue line, what tripod we used, and lens, and all the other fun stuff that you guys like to see. And of course, at the end, we're going to edit the photo so you see the settings that I used and how they can apply for what you're using. Maybe, hopefully, something that you can use for your stuff as well. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about the equipment. You guys know I got my Canon 80D, which is what I use to shoot, and I got the trusty fisheye already mounted and ready to go. So on the setting wise, we're going to set the camera here to the infinity focus, which is that really cool symbol all the way at the end. And that I'm going to be doing manually by just turning the focus points all the way to the end, okay? And the next thing I'm going to be doing is the ring for the f-stop. I'm going to set it to f8, okay? So as you can see here, it's set to f8 and ready to go. The next thing, as I mentioned in my video, is we're actually going to be using this really cool tripod. And I got it off of Amazon. It's probably like $8 or $9. And it's really sturdy, really cool, and allows me actually to, tilt the camera back a little bit, which we're going to be using obviously for that upward shot on the Tower of Terror lobby scene. Okay, so there's the settings. Let me flip it around so you guys can see the back. Okay, for something like this, I'm actually going to be shooting in manual mode since I want to control all the different settings of the camera. In this case, the f-stop, I want to control the ISO, and I want to control the shutter speed, okay? Now, the camera will provide me some helping information, which I'm going to show you, which is basically the exposure meter. But first is first. Okay, so I'm going to set my camera in the manual mode, in this case, the M on the Canon, and then I'm going to follow with the next option, which is the ISO. Before I get to the ISO, as you can see, the F says 00, and the reason for that is that since the lens is a manual lens, and I have to set it manually, you're going to see that it says it does not recognize what's the setting that I have on the lens. Of course, there's fish eyes out there that do provide it, but in this case, it does not, so which is why it shows F00. Okay, so the ISO, I want to set it to 100. As you guys know, I want to be able to set it to the best resolution possible. Let me do that pretty quickly, set it to 100. And then the next thing that we're going to do is the metering mode. And the metering mode, what I'm going to be doing is actually setting it to where it looks at the whole scene. And if you've seen my other videos, which is where we put the metering mode to the little spot in the center because we're shooting dark rides or a castle show or something, a lot of movement. Here we're going to actually use center weighted average because we want to make sure that the camera computes the whole scene, not just the part of the scene. Okay? So in this case, we're going to be setting that to center weighted average. And the other options we can leave as it is, which is the white balance. We can leave that as automatic white balance. There's no problem there. In this case, we don't need to adjust this because we're not using flash. Okay, and that's about it. Now, when we get to the location, something that's really important is that we hit the shutter button halfway to determine if I need to bring up my shutter speed or not. And if you guys know, if I hit the shutter button halfway like I'm doing now, you'll see it goes automatically out there and tries to compute the information. In this case, hitting the dial, I can actually bring up my shutter speed, bring it up or bring it down. Now I want to make sure that little dot in the middle hits 0, which means the camera has found a perfect exposure for it. Now the Canon camera, I know that you can hit it halfway through, and I think the Nikon you can do it as well, and it enables that option. It'll go after a couple seconds. So once I got it right there, spot in the middle, and again, I don't need to put this on the floor yet, okay? So I'm going to be doing this standing there before we when I put the camera on the floor, I don't need to worry about it. I know that that's the perfect setting. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do, which is also really important, is actually the timer, okay? We need to make sure that the timer is on. In this case, I'm going to set it for 10 seconds. And the reason for that is that since we're going to be doing a long exposure, we want to try to minimize the shake as much as possible. So once we put this camera on the floor, I just got to stand up and wait 10 seconds and let it do its thing and then pick up the camera. And I don't have to worry about, putting a shutter release on it or remote or anything like that. And to be honest, I love doing the timer because it's one less thing you have to worry about. You set the timer, you hit the button, you walk back, let the camera do its thing and pick it up when it's done. Okay? So that's the settings. So let's head over there to Hollywood Studios. So we're driving in now to the entrance of Hollywood Studios. You're going to see on the camera here that it's pretty much destroyed because they've been doing so much stuff here that you can see all the fences are up and stuff like that, and even the You can see way over there, far away, you can see the old entrance. It's actually to the left that we are not using, and there's actually a different toll right now, which is the one that we're going to drive into, but the older one is actually to my left. Bless you.
Please hold on to hats, glasses, or any loose items that could fall from the tram.
Okay, so we're in the queue line, and just in case if you're ever going to try this shot, you need to make sure it's through the regular line, not the fast pass line, because you can see the queue line is actually on the left side, which is the one that's going to be closer to the lobby. So here we're getting close, little by little.
It's all right.
We're going to be at the lobby, and we've got like a turn or two left. Okay, we just entered the lobby. Tower Terror. There's a couple good spots here. You can actually shoot this one down here. It's a really cool spot. And then this one over here as well. You can shoot the table. Again, I got my little tripod here. Canon ready to go. My fisheye. I'm going to set it to 5 for 6 or an 8. Maybe an 8. And we're going to be putting the camera right here on the floor. Shooting upwards. Okay, so I'll do that right now. Still people coming in. Hopefully they don't mind. I'm on my camera here. And set. Focus set to infinity. And floor, stick the floor. And here's the result. Pretty cool, right? Shoot another one. Okay, so just like that, we got our shot. As you saw, I put the camera on the floor and we shot upwards. And the funny part of that is that there's still people coming in. So it's pretty funny because you get the weird looks when the camera's on the floor like I'm getting now. But it's all good, anything for the shot. Okay, let's see how it comes out. Let's go home and check it out. Okay, so we're on our way out of Hollywood Studios. I got a ton of great shots here that I'm dying to show you guys. Okay, so hope you liked that fast forward adventure going in and out of Hollywood Studios. Obviously, for this video, I just decided to put that in fast forward. Hope you didn't mind. Okay, so now we're actually gonna go get to the editing part, which is the fun part. Okay, so starting from the top to the bottom, which is usually what I like to do, we're going to start first with the temperature. And this room by itself is pretty warm, and I mean warm, it gives that nice orange feeling to it. But here, obviously, this is overdone, so we don't want to go that warm. So we're actually going to bring down the temperature to the left, which means make it cooler, which is bringing down the number here on the left, okay? So I'm going to drag this a little bit to the left, and I think more or less there looks good, okay? Actually, I like to put 2200, like flatten the number out. I don't know why, maybe it's just a thing of mine. Okay, so that looks good. Tint I'm not going to touch because everything looks good. I don't think I need to adjust the tint here. And okay, so moving on, the next thing is exposure. Maybe just a tad to bring it up a little bit. And when we're talking about the exposure, remember this is going to affect the whole image. So we can always go back with our paintbrush and adjust certain things. So when we're talking about this exposure here, we talk about the whole thing. So I always look to see that everything looks good. You know, all the way in the back here, I can see the details over here. But I don't want to blow it out, so usually just a tad here. Okay, so let's leave it there. Contrast, I don't usually touch either.
because sometimes I think it ruins the photo, loses the detail, but that's just me. So I leave it on 0. Highlights, okay, these are the good ones. This is the highlights is the one I like to bring down always to 0 because that will bring out the details of the stuff where there's too much light. For example, if you look at the ceiling, you can see how you can't see all the details, it looks all white, but if I bring down my highlights, you see how it comes out and sees all the details really nice and cool. Okay, zoom into that, you can see literally the details. Okay, and the next one is the shadow, which does actually the opposite. It will bring out the darker areas, will bring them up. So there you go. Since we are dealing with this room, which is the Tower of Terror, I'm going to bring this up pretty high because I want to show all the little details and choose that creepy feel. The next thing I'm doing here, I'm going to bring the blacks down. And I'll leave the white for later. I'm going to explain why. And I basically even it out a little bit. There we go. Okay, so just as it is, it's starting to look really nice. Then the white, what I like of the white, it actually makes the photos pop. So if I bring this up just a tad, you'll see how the photo, not like this. It's something like this. Just a tad. Okay, awesome. Okay, so the next one we have here is clarity. I'll jump into that later. I'm gonna bring up the vibrance. Which the difference in vibrance is the colors that it has, and saturation is the whole color palette. So let's put that on 26 just to give it some punch, and look at the colors coming out. Saturation, let's do the same thing, but not that much, usually half. There we go. Now the clarity I left for last, because the cool thing with the clarity is actually gives it that HDR effect, even without using the HDR, which is pretty cool. So for example, look at this wall here, and when I bring the clarity up, you're going to see how the details come out on it. Okay, you see that? You see how the details start showing up on the wall? Let me bring this down to that 0. So that's a cool tip that I like to use, but I don't like to use it a lot because it does give a weird effect to the photo. Okay, we keep on going down here. We don't need to touch the colors. I think everything looks fine here. Unless you think it looks too orange, you can bring down the saturation a little bit. Just a tad, not that much, but it doesn't look bad at all. Just a tad here, so that way it doesn't look too orange. And we leave the other stuff. I usually don't touch the other stuff, at least not for this photo. Sharpening, since we did use a tripod, everything is sharpened, so we're just going to bring this up a good 83% or so. There we go. With that, we don't need to touch the noise reduction. And we're starting to look pretty good. Look at the detail in there. If I want to bring the noise reduction up, maybe a tad, just to soften it out a little bit. Okay, so going back here. Now here's a really cool thing with the lens, which I like to play sometimes with it, is that you can actually put a different type of lens that the one that the camera has. It'll give some really cool effects. For example, here, if I'm going to actually put, like if I had a Canon, but I had a fisheye, even though it's not a Canon, but you'll see the effect it's going to give. It's going to give that effect it's going into it, which looks really cool. And I do that for some of my photos, but not all of them. But you got that option there. Okay. Again, I'm selecting a lens which I really don't have, but I can trick the software to say, hey, put this lens in there, and I can get some really weird effects. So you got to play with this, and if there's something you like, then you leave it. Okay, here we go. Okay, now the editing, additional editing. I'm going to be using the brush here because I see some things that I can fix. And the first one is actually this blue area here. I want to make it bluer. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring the temperature down, and I'm going to paint over it to make it, and since I'm bringing the temperature down, it's going to be cooler, which means it's going to turn to blue. And the brush size is that's a little too big. Let's bring it smaller here. And the flow, we're going to leave it halfway is fine. And we're going to paint over it. And you'll see how it's starting to get bluer. You can turn the mask on if you want, but since there's so many lines, you'll probably confuse the program. So I'm just going to paint over it like this. Alright. And I like to turn this always at the end and see what I'm doing, and then go back and erase what is wrong, which is obviously the walls, because I don't want to paint the walls. Paint that. Okay. again, that's showing here the overlay, which will show what I've painted. And I can do that actually the other way also. I can come here and paint on it, and you'll see how it starts getting red. And when I got everything, I can come up here and turn it off, and there we go. Go, nice and blue. Now it is a little bright, so I can actually bring down the exposure a little bit. Look how cool it looks. Got the blue going there, and I can actually bring the highlight down also to bring out even more details. Bring the black out. There we go. There we go. Okay, so there's the roof. The next thing I'm going to do, which I like to do, is highlight certain parts of the image, like in this case here, which is the walkway. So I'm going to select another brush, and I'm going to select the exposure. I'm going to go up a little bit. Now, I don't know if you know, you can actually double click here on these options and reset them to 0. So let's say I got something like this. I can just double click here and reset them. So I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit. And I am going to paint over the walkway. Now, as you saw, I turned on my my overlay so I see where I'm painting. And you're going to see what's going to happen when we turn off, so you can see what I'm doing here. So now the walkway is brighter than the other areas, so it gives it that really cool effect. Actually, I can even adjust it so you can see here what happens. So there we go. And if I can even bring the temperature down even more just to that section. And give, there you go. There you go. That's alright. It's going to take us 3 minutes or so. You got 2 adjustments here. We got the walkway, and we got the roof. And that's our image, guys. Fresh off to Instagram.
Okay guys, so that's it for today's How Did I Shoot This photo. And hopefully if you guys like this stuff, and please go ahead and hit the like button and hit the subscribe as well. That way I can keep on doing these videos for you guys, and feel free to share it amongst your friends, of course. And again, if you got any comments or stuff that you would like to see me editing, feel free to put it in the comments underneath, and I'll put it on the queue and we'll get it done for you guys, okay? Till then, stay safe and stay awesome, guys.